In 1986, Ronald Perelman tried to buy Gillette. He failed, and yet he still walked away with an estimated profit of roughly $35 million. At first glance, that sounds contradictory. If your strategy was to buy a company and you did not buy it, how did you still make money? The answer begins by separating three things that are often confused: objective, outcome, and payoff. This is not simply the story of a failed takeover. It is a story about financial strategy, how a position creates options, how other actors can change the game, and how a strategy can produce a result different from its original objective. To understand Perelman's strategy, start with the structure of a public company. Gillette was not owned by one person. Its ownership was distributed among shareholders. And a share is not just an asset with a market price. It can also carry voting rights. If enough shares come under the control of one actor, those votes can translate into influence over the board, and ultimately into corporate control. That is the leverage point. You do not need to buy every factory, brand, contract, or patent one by one. You can try to control the financial and legal layer that governs the company as a whole. Perelman did not begin with a tender offer from zero. Revlon, which he controlled, had already accumulated roughly 14% of Gillette's shares. That changed his position. He was no longer simply an outsider who wanted Gillette. He was also a significant shareholder. And that position created options. He could buy more shares. He could make an offer. He could negotiate. He could litigate. And eventually, he could sell his stake. But the primary route was clear: convert that position into control of Gillette. In November 1986, Revlon launched a hostile tender offer at approximately $65 per share. The offer valued Gillette at more than $4 billion. And the word hostile matters. Hostile does not mean illegal. It means the offer did not have the support of Gillette's board or management. Perelman was trying to go directly to the owners, the shareholders. The logic was straightforward. Offer a price attractive enough to persuade them to sell. Each shareholder faced a choice: sell now and realize an immediate premium, or keep the shares and remain exposed to Gillette's future value. Perelman did not need every shareholder to accept. He needed enough shares to make the path toward control viable. Offer, incentive, decision, aggregation. If enough shareholders sold, Revlon's ownership would rise. More ownership could mean more voting power, and more voting power could strengthen the route toward control. The shareholders were the decision gate between Perelman's offer and Gillette itself. But Gillette was not a passive target. Its board and management, led by Coleman Mockler, opposed the takeover. And this is where one of the most important mechanisms in the entire case appears: the poison pill. Gillette had adopted this type of defense before Perelman's offensive. A poison pill does not have to physically prevent someone from buying a share. Its purpose is to change the economics of the acquisition. If the bidder crosses certain conditions, the right structure can make it far more expensive or difficult to keep accumulating control without negotiating with the board. Before the defense, the route can look almost linear: capital, then shares, then votes, then control. After the poison pill, new variables appear: higher cost, greater complexity, more risk, and more uncertainty. In strategic terms, Gillette changed Perelman's action space. And the poison pill was not the only response. Gillette sought judicial help to restrict additional purchases, while Revlon challenged the poison pill in court. What began as a financial offensive also became a legal contest. The key point is not to memorize every defensive tool. It is to understand their effect. Gillette was degrading the viability of Perelman's original acquisition path. That is the turning point. Perelman still wanted Gillette, but the system was no longer the same. He still held a large block of shares, while the route from that position to corporate control became increasingly difficult. A strategy does not exist in a vacuum. Every countermove can close some paths while leaving others open. The historical outcome was not an acquisition. Gillette eventually agreed to repurchase roughly 9.2 million Revlon shares at $59.50 per share. Including expenses, the transaction was worth about $558 million. Revlon withdrew its tender offer. Gillette remained independent. And Perelman exited his position with an estimated profit of about $35 million. The press described this outcome as greenmail. In structural terms, an investor accumulates a stake large enough to represent a credible control threat, and the target company then buys that stake back to remove the threat. But an important distinction has to be preserved. The fact that the outcome was greenmail does not prove that greenmail was Perelman's original plan. What we can observe is different. A strategy aimed at acquisition produced another historical outcome, and that outcome also generated a positive financial payoff. The money flow had effectively reversed. At first, Perelman used money to acquire Gillette shares. At the end, Gillette used money to buy those shares back from Perelman. That brings us to the most important structure in the case. Objective, outcome, and payoff are not the same thing. The objective was acquisition and control. The historical outcome was no control, a buyback, and an exit. The payoff for Perelman was still positive. There is no contradiction. An objective can fail while a financial position retains value under a different outcome, and the same event can produce different payoffs for different actors. For Perelman, control, 0. Financial payoff, positive. For Gillette, independence preserved, but at a defensive cost. For shareholders, sell into Perelman's offer and realize an immediate premium, or keep their shares and remain exposed to Gillette's future value. The same event does not have the same value for everyone. But this was not a risk-free strategy. We can see two favorable regions. One is the original path: complete the acquisition and capture the benefits associated with control. Exit the position profitably through the buyback. But there is also a third region. What happens if the acquisition fails and no favorable exit appears? That downside has to be analyzed separately. Its existence prevents the wrong conclusion that Perelman was guaranteed to win either way. He was not. There was a strategy, there were options, there were countermoves, and there was risk. Seen this way, the Perelman-Gillette case becomes more than a hostile takeover story from the 1980s. It becomes a map of financial strategy. First, you build a position. Then you try to convert that position into an objective. Other actors make decisions. The opponent responds. Its defenses change your action space. The original path can deteriorate. Other outcomes can emerge. And every outcome, combined with the position of each actor, produces a different payoff. Position, strategy, decision gate, countermove, action space, outcome, payoff, risk. That is what makes this case interesting. Not simply deciding whether Perelman won or lost, but seeing how a financial strategy can change trajectory when the system it is trying to influence is also playing.